Well, welcome back, everybody, to Northwest Small Batch Brewing. I'm between brew days here, so let's just have a brew talk, shall we? So today's brew talk, how to save money while you're homebrewing. I got 4 tips for you on how to save money while you're brewing beer. So here's the thing, though. You know, I've been brewing beer for decades, and my experience is that it's not cheaper, you know, less expensive than just buying commercial beer. Now, it does depend on what beer you're making, right? So if you're making a real basic beer, you're trying to like do a Budweiser clone, then yeah, you could probably either come close, maybe at least break even by making it yourself. But remember, these companies are huge and they are dealing with huge quantities. They're getting special discounts for buying large quantities of ingredients. They have machines. Anyway, the point is their efficiency is really good. So you're going to have a hard time, in my opinion, from my experience, making beer at home cheaper than what you can just buy. That's just my experience. But you can reduce how much you're spending to make your beer at home. So it won't necessarily, I'm not saying it's going to be cheaper than commercially made beer, but you can save some money. All right. So here's a few ways, and there are more. So if you have some other tips on saving money while you homebrew, put them in the comments, and then we have a good list going. So number 1, I call this your DIY. So build it yourself. Now, some people aren't comfortable doing that, but the point is, so, you know, the all-in-one brewing systems like the Grainfather and whatnot, you can't really build that yourself too well because it's a coffee urn style system. It's all sealed up and everything. It's difficult. However, you can make something like that, and that's kind of what the Clawhammer system is, and what the there's several systems like that. I want to say Brew Tools, even Blakeman makes one that's kind of similar. Basic point is that you take a pot and you have a hole in it at the bottom for an element. I'm not going to go through the whole list, but you get a pump, you can recirculate. You can buy all those parts separately and part it out and then put it together yourself. Some of that stuff you can build yourself. So yeah, I mean, you can buy it already ready to go, or you can price it out and see how much money could you save if you just bought all the parts yourself. Brew Hardware is a good website, by the way, if you're not familiar with, for buying parts and stuff. AliExpress, which sounds silly, this Chinese company, right? But you can get a lot of cheap, inexpensive parts through AliExpress if you're looking that route. So you could do that. All right. Number 2, second way you can save some money with homebrewing is reuse your yeast. Yeast is probably the second most expensive item in your ingredient list, right? It is the second most expensive ingredient after your grain. So I would say you could do this with some dry yeast, that the more newer types of dry yeast that are coming out from white labs and stuff that are, you know, more specific to types of beer. I wouldn't necessarily, I mean, you can do it with like USO5, but I don't know that it's really going to save you a lot of money. It's not that expensive. Dry yeast tends to be cheaper. But if you're using liquid yeast, 100% this will save you money, because liquid yeast is expensive, especially, you know, if you're buying enough for an entire batch. And there's different ways you can reuse the yeast. You don't have to, like, you know, the one common way is what they call washing the yeast. It's a process. You can Google it or look through YouTube. There's lots of channels that have gone through the process of how to wash your yeast. And then it's good for a couple months to be able to reuse it. And then you're saving a lot of money and not having to rebuy yeast. Although you're having to use that same strain, right? You're not getting a chance to use a different strain. So there is that issue I have with it, but it will save you money in the long run. You could also repitch on top of an existing yeast cake. So if you've just kicked your keg and you're ready to put a new beer on top of it, you could just pitch right on top of the yeast cake, shake the bejesus out of it, and then you should be good to go. Now, generally speaking, you know, you could do that a few times, and then you're going to start having diminishing returns. So you can't do it forever, but you could definitely reuse your yeast that way. Yeah, so that's something to look at. Third way you can save money. switching to all grain. Speaking of grain, here's the thing about extract. First of all, extract beer is just as good. I mean, it's the same ingredients. I don't know how anybody can claim it's not. You know, extract is coming from grain. It's made from grain. It's the same thing, except that you're having someone else do it for you, right? You've paid somebody to do a base malt and mash it for an hour, extract all the possible sugars from it, and then boil it down into a syrup. So all you have to do is reconstitute it, you know, back to it's sort of like concentrated orange juice, the frozen concentrated orange juices that we have here in the US. Same idea, right? So there is nothing that I can see, and anyway, I'm getting on a tangent here. The point is, it's more expensive, usually, because you're paying somebody to do that whole process for you, right? Whereas if you buy all grain, you're the one doing the labor and the work. Of course, you have to have the equipment to do it, but it will save you some money by doing that. Number 4, and this is probably the biggest one in my opinion, buy in bulk when you can. I'm at the point now where I know that I like 2 kinds of base grain. I generally always use 2-row, and I use Munich. So I try to buy 55-pound bags of these at the local homebrew store, which is way cheaper than buying, you know, just what you need for each beer, and then I mill it at home. If you don't have a homebrew store, you can sometimes do these buys through homebrew clubs, if you're part of a homebrew club. If you have friends that brew, you could go in together on a bag and then split it between you. And just make sure that you're buying it not milled. So you need a mill at home. And then, you know, store it in nice tight containers. I personally like to use a vacuum sealer and put it into like little 2-pound bags. So it's easier for me to measure out when I need it. And plus it keeps it really airtight. Let's do a bonus one, shall we? Number 5, fifth tip on saving money with homebrewing: cut down on your hops. Hops are super expensive. So there's lots of ways you can cut down on hops. The obvious way is boil your wort longer and use less hops. You know, you're still going to get more bittering out of those hops, the bittering hops that you put in for the 60 minutes, but you put less and then you boil longer and you still get the bitterness, and you're not having to use as many hops. You could grow your own hops. A lot of people do that, although you're looking at fresh hopping, which is a little different than what we do with the pellets, but still you're going to save money by doing that. Make sure you're using proper storage. So if you buy your hops, and you have some left over, I like to put mine again in vacuum sealed bags and then stick them in the freezer, and that will keep them almost indefinitely from what I've seen. What else? You could buy a large, bulk buys of hops like from Yakima Valley and stuff. The problem is that I don't like to use one type of hop for everything, so I don't do that, but I do know people that buy giant amounts of hops, especially if they use one particular hop for all their bittering or something like that. Yeah, that's it. I think that's a good list of ways to save money. I'll be back in another week for another video, and until then, salud.